What's going on, everyone? So Shaquille O'Neal had some interesting things to say about Victor Wembanyama, and he was over on the Pat McAfee show, and I wanted to kind of talk about this and kind of go over it, right? Shaquille O'Neal on Victor Wembanyama, I don't really think you can be dominant when you're shooting jump shots a lot, right? Now, obviously, some people might immediately look at this and go, well, it's just, Shaq is the most dominant player ever, right? He's an old head. He believes big men should be in the paint. The NBA is different. The NBA has evolved, right? It's not the same game, all that stuff, which, you're right. It's true, right? The Shaq is a guy that, not the best example when you're talking about like guys that would translate. Shaq would translate in any era, even this NBA, right? Shaquille O'Neal would probably dominate. Shaquille would probably average 50, if not more, in today's NBA. Like, it's just so monstrous, right? But also, people forget, and Shaq too. Shaq was not the Los Angeles Lakers Shaquille O'Neal when he came in the league. Coming out of LSU, I mean, he was that, almost Lamar Odom, bringing the ball up the court, floor running big, could do a little bit of everything, right? Like, he was very different than the guy that he evolved into, right? And became with the Lakers. But you look at Victor Wembanyama, right? And Shaq, look, he's been very critical about big men in the recent years, regardless, right? He wants big men to basically just get on the block and dominate, which, to an extent, I do agree with. To an extent, like you look at guys like Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns just wants to play out on the perimeter and shoot 10 threes a game. And it's like, dude, you're 7 feet. You're a skilled big man around the rim. Like, you should be getting 30 a game easy, and same thing, like even Joel Embiid, right? Joel Embiid at times would rather stand on the perimeter and just shoot 10 threes rather than using his skill set around the rim. I mean, the dude's nearly unstoppable around the rim, right? Like the days of like the big man, like Jokic is probably the only and we'll see what Zach Edey does and stuff, but Jokic is kind of the only close thing that we have to a traditional center that is comfortable and wants to play. I'm not saying Jokic won't ever shoot threes, but it's few and far between, right? He's not taking 7 threes a game or anything like that, right? Like where you look at a guy like Joel Embiid, and it's just like he would prefer to be out on the perimeter and shoot a bunch of threes, right? And so like you look at Joel, right? He's averaging 3.6 attempts per game from three-point range, right? Which I don't think is crazy. I don't think that's too much. But again, that's average. There's times where he kind of falls in love with it, particularly in the playoffs, right? So you get to the playoffs, like last year in the playoffs, he averaged 6.5 attempts per game. It's things like that really highlights, right? Like when it matters, you don't want to go on the block, right? When it matters, you'd rather just stay out on the perimeter and just jack up threes. And to me, I think that's what Shaq is referring to with Wemby, right? That he does, he wants Wemby to be more like Jokic, right? Jokic averages, like last season, averaged 2.9 threes per game, right? Shot 36%. You look at the playoffs, however, he's averaging last year 4.4, right? Uptick by basically 1 3 a game, right? Okay, fine. He's not shooting 6, 7, 8 threes a game. But you look at Victor. Now, obviously, we don't have playoff stats. We don't know what he'll do in the playoffs. But Victor Wembanyama last year shot 5.5 three-point attempts per game at 32.5%. He took 16.7 attempts. So you're talking basically a third of his attempts were from three, which I don't think is terrible. But he's also 7'4", with an 8-foot wingspan, and there's not a guy in the league that can defend him around the rim. So I do think that Shaq has a point to an extent. However, I do think that, and especially in today's NBA, with the type of offense, with the schemes and all that, and just defensive standpoint, right? One, I don't think you can really compare Wemby, period, because we've never really seen a guy like this. And the ground in which he covers is insane, right? Like, again, he's 7'4" with an 8-foot wingspan. He just covers an insane amount of ground that very few ever in the league can cover. because he's just this height and this just length, right? But I don't mind Wemby or any center taking threes within the flow of the offense. But where I think Shaq should have maybe rewarded what he said in the sense of you don't want to see big men fall in love with the three, right? That, I think, is a fair point, right? You don't want to see Wemby taking 6, 7 threes a game, even if he's shooting it, at a 38% clip. You don't. You want him around the basket where he's using his advantages. He's still in plays. He's able to help generate and create offensive rebounds. Right? If he's out on the perimeter taking 7, 8 threes, you're not giving yourself the opportunity on misses and using his size and length to your advantage, right? If you essentially have him out of the action, then he's not as impactful as he could be. Now, if he's hot and he's cooking a game, then sure. If he's 3 of 4 from three-point range, and then he shoots another, and now he's 4 or 5, yeah, keep going. If you're hot, you're hot. But in and out of the game, right, like, you don't want to see it. You got to remember, a guy averaging, 3 threes a game is an average. That means there's nights where he shot, 2, and there's nights where he shot 7 or 8. Wemby averaging 5.5 means that there were nights where he shot 3 or 4, and there were nights where he shot 9 or 10, right? Like, so again, you don't want to see big guys. Even Cat. Cat might arguably be it might not even be arguably, but Cat is one of the best, if not the best, big shooting in the league, right? Shooting the 3 ball, there's very few that match up with him in that regard. You look at Cat, he averaged 41.6% from three-point range last year. He only took 5.3 attempts. Now, again, he's had seasons where he's taken 8. He's had seasons where he's taken 6. But last year, on 41.6%, took 5.3 attempts. Again, Victor on 32% shot more attempts on average at 5.5%. That's an issue, right? Again, if Wemby's shooting 40% from 3, then fine, let it rip, but he's not. And I understand he's a rookie and he's going to improve and he's going to get better. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean that he doesn't shoot threes or take threes. But again, you want to take advantages and use your advantage any way you can. And the Spurs have an advantage that they just don't have anywhere else, which is Victor Wembanyama. Also, in Wemby's defense, unless he was out on the perimeter, there was a lot of times where he just wouldn't even get the basketball, right? I talked about it heavily, that, Wemby would be he'd have clear established position, have a mismatch, have somebody on his hip, and his players would just completely look him off. Completely. And then, if he was out on the perimeter, I was like, oh, here you go, Wemby. But now you got Chris Paul. Now Chris Paul, when you do get that established position, when you do put yourself in a position to have that mismatch or advantage, Chris Paul isn't going to miss that. Chris Paul is going to hit you, and he's going to make sure that he gets you the ball in the spot. I want to see with Chris Paul, I want to see Wemby be more of a dominant big man in the post. Again, I don't think Shaq's comments are out of pocket. I think Shaq's comments aren't worded properly. I understand and I get what Shaq is talking about. I get where he's getting at. So many big men would rather shoot threes than get on the block and do the dirty work. And I do, to an extent, I do agree with that. But also, you got to understand context. You got to understand today. And I agree with Shaq in the sense of wording it as you don't want to see a big man falling in love with the 3. If a big man wants to take the occasional 3, fine. That's fine. Take the occasional 3. But you don't want to see a guy like Victor Wembanyama who basically every time he has the ball around the basket, it's a guaranteed bucket, take fewer and fewer attempts around the basket, right? You want him, if he's shooting 70% from 2-point range, you want him shooting from 2-point range. If you can get a 70% shot or a 32% shot, what would you rather have? Right? Like, those are the differences. Right? So, I'm hoping that with Chris Paul, you'll see more of just Wemby's dominance, particularly around the rim. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, and I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you agree? Do you think, like, yeah, look, Shaq worded it improperly, but yes, don't want to see Wemby falling in love with the three. Do you think, no, like, hey, Shaq's right the way he worded it? Again, do you think, like, no, like, hey, let him take as many as he can? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot, so we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one.